What if I told you that attracting women as you get older has nothing to do with money, looks, or pickup lines, and everything to do with just two simple words that most men never use correctly? Stay with me, because this could completely change the way women respond to you. I've worked with men and women navigating love, attraction, and emotional connection, especially in later life. I've sat with couples in their 50s, 60s, even 70s who thought the spark had faded. And I've seen it reignite with nothing more than a shift in communication. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt truly seen by someone? Not judged, not evaluated, not tolerated, but actually seen for who you are? And if you're a man watching this, when was the last time you expressed what you really wanted without softening it, without apologizing for it, without hiding behind humor or indifference? If that question makes you pause even for a second, then you're exactly where you need to be. Because what we're about to talk about isn't just about attracting women. It's about reconnecting with a part of yourself you may have silenced years ago. Now, if you're a man over 40, 50, or even 60, wondering quietly whether women still feel that pull toward you, I want you to hear this clearly. Yes, they do. But not for the reasons most men are told. Not for status, not for charm tricks, not for being flashy. True attraction, real, lasting, deeply rooted attraction, comes from something much more subtle and much more powerful. It comes from emotional leadership. Here's what I've learned after studying thousands of male-female interactions. From first dates to long marriages, from post-divorce uncertainty to late-life rediscovery. The men who attract the most are not always the best-looking. They're not always the richest. And they're rarely the loudest in the room. They're the ones who create a feeling of clarity, a feeling of calm, a feeling of being chosen. And they do it through something incredibly simple. Something so simple that most men overlook it entirely. They communicate clearly, directly, emotionally. If that's something you need to understand, hit subscribe right now and stay with me all the way to the end. Because the final section of this video contains the one insight that determines whether everything you say lands as magnetic or disappears into the air. And most men never see it coming. Let's begin. 1. The emotional state behind the words matters more than the words themselves. We start here because this is the insight that makes everything else in this video actually work. And it's the insight that most men, even men who understand the psychology intellectually, completely miss in practice. You can say the right words. You can understand the psychology. You can even practice the structure. But if the emotional state behind your words is not aligned with what you're expressing, it won't land the way you intend. And this is the mistake most men never see themselves making. Using the words without embodying them. Here's the truth about this. The phrase "I want" is not powerful because of the words. It's powerful because of the certainty behind it. And "I appreciate" is not impactful because it sounds kind. It's impactful because it reflects genuine presence. If "I want" comes from a place of neediness, it feels like pressure. If it comes from insecurity, it feels like validation seeking. But when it comes from grounded self-worth, it feels calm, clean, and quietly attractive. There is no grasping in it. No urgency. Just clarity. Women feel that difference instantly. Not logically, emotionally. The same applies to "I appreciate." If it's used as a technique, it feels empty. If it's used to get something in return, it feels transactional. But when it comes from real observation and real presence, it lands deeply because it feels earned. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The emotional state you bring to your words is entirely within your power. The words themselves are not the work. The internal alignment is the work. Here's something I want to be genuinely honest with you about. I've seen men practice these exact phrases, practice the structure, rehearse the timing, and still watch the moment fall flat. Not because they said something wrong, but because the energy behind what they said was coming from a place of want rather than wholeness. She heard the words. She felt the hunger beneath them. And that hunger, however understandable, is not the same as the groundedness that makes clarity magnetic. So here's what I want you to do before anything else in this video. The next time you're preparing to say something meaningful to a woman, take one full breath first. Not as a technique, as a genuine pause to check in with yourself. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? Am I saying this because I need her to respond in a particular way? Or am I saying this because it's simply true and deserves to be said? If the answer is the first, wait. Not forever. Just long enough to find the ground beneath your own feet again. Because the man who speaks from grounded wholeness, who says I want because he genuinely does and I appreciate because he genuinely feels it, is the man whose words carry weight that no amount of practice can manufacture. The emotional state is the foundation. Now, let's look at one of the most powerful specific expressions available to any man and why most men are afraid to use it. 2. I appreciate, the word that makes her feel seen, not just desired. Appreciation does something that desire alone cannot. It makes her feel seen. Not just looked at, not just desired, but genuinely understood. And there is a profound difference between those two experiences that most men never fully appreciate. Most women have heard compliments about their appearance countless times in their lives. You look beautiful. You're attractive. You have a great smile. And while those aren't wrong, they don't always go deep. They don't always create connection. They slide off the surface of someone who has heard them before without landing anywhere real. But when you say something like, I appreciate how thoughtful you are. I appreciate how calm you stayed in that situation. I appreciate your perspective on that. You're doing something entirely different. You are acknowledging her inner world. You are showing her that you were paying attention not to how she looks, but to who she is. And when someone feels seen at that level, something biological happens. The brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It creates a sense of closeness, trust, warmth, and most importantly, emotional imprinting, which means she begins to associate you with that feeling of being understood. And that's what people come back for. Not perfection, not performance, but that specific feeling of being genuinely seen by someone who is actually paying attention. The psychologist Carl Rogers wrote, when someone really hears you without passing judgment on you, without trying to take responsibility for you, without trying to mold you, it feels damn good. That experience of being heard without judgment, seen without agenda, is what genuine appreciation creates in another person. It is one of the rarest gifts available in human connection, and it costs nothing except presence. Here's something I've noticed about how men use appreciation and where it goes wrong. Either they don't express it at all, because no one ever taught them that appreciation is a form of masculine expression rather than a softness to be avoided. Or they overdo it in a way that feels like flattery. Too many compliments, too quickly, too general, and instead of creating connection, it creates doubt. Does he really mean this? Is he just saying what he thinks I want to hear? The key is rhythm and specificity. Observe, pause, reflect, then express something real that you actually noticed. For example, if she shares how she handled a difficult situation, instead of jumping to advice or changing the subject, you might say, I appreciate how calmly you handled that. That says a lot about your strength. Now you've done 3 things simultaneously. You acknowledged her experience. You reflected her inner quality back to her. And you created a moment of genuine emotional connection. This is what psychologists call attunement, the ability to read and respond to another person's inner world with accuracy and warmth. And when someone feels attuned to, they relax. They open, they trust, not because you perform something skillfully, but because they felt genuinely understood. Here's what I want you to practice this week. Pick one interaction with anyone, not just a woman you're romantically interested in, and before the conversation ends, express one specific appreciation. Not something vague like, I appreciate you. Something specific to what you actually observed in that interaction. I appreciate how directly you said that. I appreciate how patient you were just now. I appreciate the way you thought through that before responding. Notice what happens. Notice how the other person responds, and notice how you feel after saying it. Because here's what I've found consistently. The man who trains himself to see and express specific appreciation becomes genuinely more attuned to the people around him. Not as a technique, as a way of being. And that way of being, that quality of actually noticing people and telling them what you notice, is one of the most fundamentally attractive things a human being can embody. Now, let's look at the word that works in partnership with appreciation, the one that brings direction into everything you've just built. 3. Emotional leadership, knowing what you feel and expressing it with clarity. Here's what most men are never taught. Attraction isn't just visual. It's neurological. The human brain is constantly scanning for signals, signals of safety, signals of certainty, signals of emotional presence. And when those signals are clear, something powerful happens. The brain begins to associate you with a feeling. Psychologists call this emotional anchoring. It means that over time, your presence becomes linked to specific emotional states. Comfort, excitement, safety, desire. So, when she thinks of you, she doesn't just remember what you said. She remembers how she felt. And emotional leadership is the practice of consciously creating that feeling, not through performance, but through genuine presence. When a woman hears the words I want, her brain doesn't just process the sentence. It scans for something underneath it. Safety, stability, emotional grounding. She's not just asking, what does he want? She's asking, is this man steady enough to hold what he wants? Is he someone whose desire I can trust? Is his presence the kind I can relax into? And this becomes even more important as people get older, because attraction shifts. It moves away from impulsive excitement and towards something much more powerful, emotional peace. That feeling of being able to exhale around someone, to relax, to not second guess. And when you say something like, I want to see you again, calmly, steadily, without urgency, without pressure, you're signaling something very specific to her nervous system. You're signaling you're safe here. There's a concept in psychology called co-regulation. It means our nervous systems respond to each other. If you're anxious, she will feel that. If you're grounded, her body softens. And this is why some people feel instantly calming to be around even if you can't explain why. They're not trying too hard. They're not overcompensating. They're simply regulated. The psychologist Daniel Goleman wrote, "Emotional intelligence is the sine qua non of leadership." And the leadership he described, knowing your emotional world and navigating it with clarity and grace, is exactly what creates the quality of presence that women find most compelling in a mature man. Not dominance, not control. Leadership of your own internal experience, expressed through how you communicate, how you listen, how you hold yourself when things are uncertain. Here's something I want you to be honest about. Many men have spent decades adapting, compromising, avoiding conflict, smoothing things over. And over time, that can slowly disconnect a man from his own voice, his own desires, his own sense of what he wants and what he values. The adaptation becomes so habitual that expressing what he actually wants starts to feel like a risk rather than a right. But here's something important to understand. Grounded presence is attractive, not self-erasure, not over-accommodation, not invisibility. You do not become more appealing by disappearing. You become more appealing by becoming clear. Here's what I want you to practice this week. In one low-stakes conversation with a friend, a colleague, anyone, identify one moment where you would normally say I'm fine with anything or whatever you prefer. And instead, say what you actually want. I prefer the Italian place if you're open to that. I actually want to see that film rather than the other one. Small, simple, but real. And notice what happens. Not just in the interaction, but in your own body. The small, steadying feeling that comes from saying what you actually mean. The quiet confidence that returns when you stop editing yourself before you've even opened your mouth. Emotional leadership is not something you perform. It's something you recover. And once you start recovering it, everything about your presence shifts. Now, let's look at the specific words that make all of this concrete and usable in any interaction. For I want, the two words that change everything. When a man says I want, with clarity and calm confidence, he is doing something that immediately sets him apart from the majority. He is taking responsibility for his desire. He is not asking for permission. He is not outsourcing the decision to whoever is in front of him. He is not hiding behind ambiguity or endless accommodation. He is choosing. And there is something deeply attractive about a man who chooses. Not forcefully, not aggressively, but clearly. Think about how many conversations have happened in your life where nothing was actually said, where everything was implied, hinted at, softened, circled, until the moment lost its meaning entirely. I don't mind. Whatever you'd like. I'm okay with anything. Let me know what you prefer. On the surface, it sounds polite, easygoing, even kind. But underneath, it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty does not build attraction. In fact, for many women, especially women with life experience, constant accommodation creates the opposite of what you intend. It makes them feel like they're not being chosen, like the moment doesn't actually matter to you, like you're not fully there. And absence, even when it's gentle and well-intentioned, does not build connection. Presence does. Now imagine a different energy entirely. I want to take a walk after dinner. Simple, direct, grounded. There's no pressure in it, no demand, but there is presence. There is direction. There is a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to say so calmly. And that quality, especially in a man over 50 or 60 who might be expected to have withdrawn from expressing desire, is genuinely striking. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." A man who has decided who he is and expresses his desires from that decided place rather than from the anxious edge of approval-seeking communicates something with his whole being that words alone can never fully capture. He communicates that he knows himself. And knowing yourself at any age is one of the most consistently attractive qualities a human being can possess. Here's something I want to be honest with you about. Many men avoid saying I want not because they don't know what they want, but because they're afraid of what it might cost them to say it. Rejection, disapproval, conflict. And often that fear doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins much earlier, in moments where expressing desire led to embarrassment or dismissal, or being told to tone it down. So over time, something quiet happens. Desire becomes private. Expression becomes cautious. And eventually, it disappears from communication altogether. But here's the truth about what that disappearance costs you. Attraction cannot grow in the absence of expressed desire. It needs direction. It needs to feel like something is actually happening, not just floating in the comfortable ambiguity of two people being pleasant to each other without moving anywhere. Let me share a real example. David, 58, divorced, successful in his career, but quietly convinced he had become invisible to women. He told me, "I feel like I'm doing everything right, but nothing is happening." On his third date with a woman named Linda, he almost defaulted to his usual pattern. "Let me know if you want to see me again." Safe, neutral, forgettable. But this time he stopped himself. He took a breath. And he said, "I want to see you again. I appreciate how easy it is to talk to you. That means a lot to me." Then he paused. No over-explaining. No nervous laughter. Just presence. Linda later told him that was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically. Not instantly. But clearly. Because for the first time she felt like she knew where she stood. And that feeling, of being chosen clearly and calmly, is incredibly attractive. Not just pleasant. Not just nice. Genuinely compelling. Here's what I want you to practice. This week, say "I want" once in a situation where you would normally have said something neutral. Not in a high-stakes romantic situation, necessarily. Just somewhere real. "I want to try that restaurant. I want to take the coast road. I want to come back to this conversation." Just once. Clearly. Without apologizing for it. And notice how the person you're speaking with responds. And notice how you feel. Because the man who has reclaimed his right to express what he actually wants, without making it someone else's burden, has become significantly more interesting than the man who perpetually defers. Now, let's look at how these two words actually work together in real-life moments, because understanding them separately is only half of what you need. 5. Why attraction shifts as you get older, and what women actually respond to now. Here's something most men are never told clearly enough. As we age, attraction changes. Not just in what we experience, but in what generates it. And for many men, the shift happens without them realizing it, and they keep using the same approaches that worked in their 30s, wondering why the results are different. In earlier life, attraction is often driven by novelty, by excitement, by the electric unpredictability of someone new and unknown. But as women age, and particularly as they accumulate their own life experience, their own losses, their own understanding of what actually sustains a relationship over time, what they respond to shifts fundamentally. They move away from impulsive excitement and toward emotional peace. That feeling of being able to exhale around someone. Of not having to manage their own emotions and someone else's simultaneously. Of feeling chosen by someone who is steady enough to be trusted with being chosen. The psychologist John Gottman documented in decades of research, what makes love last is not passion alone, it's the small, everyday moments of connection, attunement, and repair. What Gottman found was that the relationships that endured and remained genuinely satisfying were not the ones with the most dramatic romantic energy. They were the ones where people consistently felt seen, heard, and chosen, in ordinary moments, not just extraordinary ones. Here's what I want you to sit with honestly. If you're a man over 60 who has lived a full life, who has survived difficulties, made decisions, recovered from losses, built something real with your time, you carry something that cannot be manufactured by a younger man who hasn't yet been through any of that. You carry depth. You carry the kind of steadiness that only comes from having been genuinely tested. And that depth, that particular quality of groundedness that has been earned rather than performed, is one of the most quietly compelling things a woman with life experience can encounter. But here's the problem. Most men don't know how to express it. They've spent so many decades accommodating, adapting, staying safe, keeping the peace, that the expression of what they genuinely feel and want has become unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable, like a language they once spoke fluently that they haven't used in years. Here's what I want you to do. Think about one man in your life, living or from your past, whose presence you genuinely respected. Not because of what he had or what he'd achieved, because of how he carried himself, how he spoke, how he held his ground without being rigid, how he expressed care without losing himself. What was it about him specifically that created that impression? Because the qualities you just identified, that's the territory you're moving toward. Not by becoming someone else. By giving yourself permission to be more fully who you already are. The man who has lived 60 or more years and has arrived at some clarity about what matters, and who can say that clarity out loud, is not just attractive. He's rare. And rare is remembered. Now, let's take everything we've covered and make it immediately usable. 6. The practical structure. How to use these words in real life without it ever feeling scripted. Let's slow this down and step into a few real moments you may recognize. Because understanding the principle is one thing. Knowing how to use it when you're actually in the moment, when the conversation is ending and you can feel the weight of what you might say, that's where everything either comes together or quietly falls apart. Imagine you're sitting across from a woman on a date. The conversation has been good, not perfect, but easy. There's been laughter, a few meaningful moments, a sense that something could grow here. And the evening is coming to an end. This is one of the most important emotional moments in the entire interaction. And yet, this is where most men disappear. They soften. They retreat. They go neutral. Yeah, it was nice. We should do this again sometime. Let me know what you think. It sounds harmless, but emotionally it lands as uncertainty. There's no imprint, no direction, no clarity. She leaves the evening with warmth, but no sense of being chosen. Now shift that same moment just slightly. You take a breath. You stay present. And you say, I want to see you again. I appreciate how natural tonight felt. Then you stop. You don't rush to fill the silence. You don't try to read her face immediately. You allow the moment to exist. Do you feel the difference? Because she will. That one shift creates an emotional anchor tied to the entire evening. Instead of remembering scattered, pleasant moments, she remembers how she felt right there. Chosen. Seen. At ease. And that becomes the beginning of something, not the end of a date. The psychologist B.F. Skinner demonstrated in his research, the behavior of organisms is controlled by its consequences. The emotional consequence she carries from your evening together is shaped by those last moments more than by anything that came before. Not because the rest didn't matter, but because the ending is where emotion consolidates into memory. Here's a simple structure you can start using immediately. Express desire. Link it to appreciation, then pause. That's the whole thing. 3 steps. I want to spend more time with you. I appreciate how grounded I feel around you. Pause. Let it land. No extra words needed. No nervous laughter to fill the silence. No immediate pivot to logistics. Just, I said something true. And now I'm comfortable enough to let it breathe. Let me give you another real story. Robert, 62, widowed, thoughtful, kind, but deeply hesitant when it came to expressing what he wanted. When I first worked with him, he said something that stayed with me. He said, I don't even know if I'm allowed to want things anymore. That sentence carries more weight than it seems. Because underneath it is years of adaptation, loss, responsibility, and silence. He had spent so many years attending to other people's needs, his family, his responsibilities, his grief, that his own wants had become almost inaccessible. So I asked him a simple question. What do you want now? And he paused longer than most people would. Then he said, I want companionship. I want laughter. I want someone to travel with. And as he said those words, something shifted in his posture. He sat slightly straighter. His voice steadied. Because he wasn't just answering a question. He was reconnecting with himself. On his next date, instead of waiting for cues or trying to be agreeable, he said something simple. I want to take a short trip this fall. I'd enjoy planning it with someone special. That's it. No pressure. No expectation. Just a window into his world. And later the woman he was with told him that was the moment she saw him differently. Not as a nice man, but as a man with direction. And direction is magnetic. Here's a 3-week practice plan that I want you to actually follow, not just think about. Week 1, practice I want in low-stakes situations. With friends, with colleagues, in small daily decisions. I want to try that restaurant. I want to go for a walk this afternoon. I want to see that film rather than the other one. Get comfortable hearing your own voice express desire without immediately softening it. Week 2, practice I appreciate. Notice small specific things. I appreciate how directly you said that. I appreciate how clearly you explained this. Train your mind to observe people genuinely, and then tell them what you observed. The specificity is what makes it land. Week 3, combine them naturally. In a real conversation with a woman you feel genuine interest in. Not forced. Not rehearsed. Just present enough to say what's actually true. I want to continue this conversation. I appreciate how honest you've been with me tonight. And here's something critical about body language that must accompany these words. When you express desire, stand tall. Breathe slowly. Hold eye contact just a moment longer than usual, not intensely, but steadily. When you express appreciation, soften your gaze slightly. Relax your face. Let your voice lower just 1 register. Because your energy must match your words. Women, especially those with life experience, read energy before language. Always. The words are the vehicle. Your presence is the message. And one last thing I want you to understand. Consistency in these small expressions builds something over time that cannot be built any other way. It builds predictability, and predictability builds trust. Not boredom. Trust. And trust is what allows attraction to grow over time instead of fading after the initial excitement. Real connection is not built on dramatic highs. It's built on emotional steadiness. Depth, not drama. Now, let's bring everything together. Because if you've stayed with me this long, you're already doing something different from most men. You're paying attention. You're reflecting. And that's where all real change begins. The 2 words are simple. I want. I appreciate. But the power behind them is not in the words. It's in the certainty that comes from knowing yourself. The presence that comes from being fully in a moment, rather than managing it from a distance. The courage that comes from expressing what is true rather than what is safe. 2 words, when spoken with genuine presence, have the power to change not just how women respond to you, but how you show up in your entire life. Because a man who can say clearly what he wants and honestly what he values is a man who has come home to himself. And that homecoming is visible, felt, unmistakable. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel completely confident. Start small. Start real. Say one clear, I want this week. Express one genuine, I appreciate. And notice what shifts. Not just in how others respond, but in how you feel. Because something will change. And once you feel that shift, you won't want to go back. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 2 words feels harder to say honestly right now? I want or I appreciate. Comment below and tell me. Because that answer will tell you a lot about where your growth edge actually is. And I do read every single comment, and I'll reach out to some of you personally. And if this video resonated with you, like it's so more people can discover this message. Subscribe if you want to go deeper into understanding attraction, emotional connection, and human behavior at this level. And share it with someone who needs to hear this, because men are not taught this. But they absolutely can learn it. Because you don't need more tactics. You don't need more tricks. You need truth. I want. I appreciate. 2 simple expressions that when spoken with presence have the power to change not just how women respond to you, but how you show up in your entire life. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It genuinely means everything to me. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself.